Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Anna Blanco and I am the Executive Director of the International Ocean Film Festival. And it's my honor and my pleasure to welcome everyone who's joining us live for our live stream Q&A this afternoon. Real pleasure to have everyone here, and it's my honor to welcome everyone and give everyone a proper introduction. So let me start with our guest of honor here, Denis Blaquiere, and of Canada, who's joining us just outside of Montreal. He's the filmmaker and the writer for Under Thin Ice. Thank you so much, Denis, for joining us.
My pleasure.
Also joining us today is Jill Heinerth, a Canadian extreme diver, also in the film herself. She's joining us from just outside of Ottawa. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
And our special guest today, who also helps to make all of this happen and has been our sponsor for the festival for many, many years, our dear friend, Rana Sarkar, the Consul General of Northern California and Hawaii. Thank you, Rana, for being here.
Great to be here.
Thank you. And then, of course, we have our moderator for the afternoon, Sebastian Nicholls, a very well-known diver amongst the film festival group, is actually joining us from Monterey, just having gone diving today, actually. And Sebastian serves as our board president, and we're excited to have you moderating this panel discussion. So thank you all. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sebastian.
Thank you very much, Anna. I'm honored to be here among such accomplished divers, filmmakers, and Rana, a good friend of the festival. Thank you so much for the support of the Consul General of Canada in San Francisco for many years. I wanted to also welcome our audience. This is the first Q&A session in the first ever online virtual film festival. And so we're excited to have you all joining us and viewing and listening into this important conversation. The film Under Thin Ice is amazing. The shots are beautiful. The issues that it talks about are urgent and important. And the places that it visits are just otherworldly. I wanted to start with the inspiration for the film. Denis, if you can tell us why you had this motivation to make the film and what was the process like of coming up with the idea of Under Thin Ice?
Under Thin Ice is an important film because, humanity is presently at the crossroads in its fight against global warming. And the situation is really urgent, especially in the Canadian Arctic, which is warming up 3 times faster than the rest of the planet. So most of us folks are not that worried about that because all this momentous change in the Arctic is happening far away on the ice, under the ice, and in places where we will never have the chance to go, you know. So the idea of the film was to take the viewer and bring him in the Arctic and see for himself what's happening on the ice, in the ice, and under the ice, where none of us will ever have the chance to go, you know. So the idea of having 2 Canadian extreme divers, Mario Cyr and Jill Heinerth, coming with us and doing this extraordinary over the ice and under the ice trek, was to bring the viewer face to face, having kind of close encounters of the cold kind, and see and coming face to face with all the web of life which is threatened by global warming, be there microscopic plankton or 100-ton whales. It's and I think that the film is working fine because, you know, we were ourselves the filming crew, a victim of climate change, because we were, filming on the ice pack, which was melting fast with giant crevices opening up all over the place. And we were confronted with the changes in the behavior of the animals also. We saw that our Inuit guides were taken aback by the fact that it was hard to find walrus where they were all the time there in the years before. So, and my goal also was that the landscape would become a character in the film. And that was achieved by using drones. And because it's a wonderful landscape, with the light is so gorgeous and the animals are impressive and fantastic, and having Jill and Mario go under the ice with 4K cameras, well, that was really something to see. And I think that the goal is achieved, because why I made this film is also because what's happening in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic anymore. We explain in the film how our own climates in the US, in Europe, and in Canada is changing because our planetary air conditioning system, which is the ice in the Arctic, is now breaking down. So everyone should take notice and act and try and change their habits, so that the fight against global change will change. We will win that fight.
Thank you, Denis. That's so important. And this summer, we've seen temperatures not in the Canadian Arctic, but in the Russian Arctic go beyond 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is really striking. And
it's mind-boggling.
The changes are definitely frightening, I think, on business as usual. Even if the Paris Agreement commitments are met, we'll still be at 2.5 to 3.7 degrees Celsius warming above pre-industrial levels. And scientists tell us 1.5 or 2 is the threshold beyond which we'd have catastrophic change. So I want to, you gave such a good answer and mentioned the role of those close shots of the polar bears, of the walruses, in making this beautiful film. And so I want to go to another speaker who had the chance to be in the water. And Jill, I can only imagine how challenging it is to dive in water that's 0 degrees Celsius or -1 degrees Celsius. And having a massive camera must just be incredibly challenging in addition. And then meeting with animals that weigh several tons, that could, with the stroke of a paw or a fin, do a lot of damage. So I wanted to hear from you what that was like. You've done a lot of extreme diving in caves. Obviously, there are dangers of diving under ice, but also what was it like to just encounter these massive, majestic animals underwater and be, at risk or humbled by their presence there?
Yeah, it's funny. As a cave diver, people say that's the most dangerous sport, but I think that swimming with a polar bear is probably far more dangerous. And frankly, that was my first time. Mario has been to the Arctic many more years than I have. I've been so many times, but never in the water with polar bears or walrus. And so I needed his guidance to go ahead with this. And I thought the polar bears were absolutely terrifying. But Mario was actually more concerned about the walruses. And when we did jump in the water with the walruses, the first thing they do is turn to the nearest piece of ice and bash their tusks against the ice floes to show you what they'll do with your head if they'll get you. So that's always in the back of your mind. But for the polar bear shots, the deal is you get in the water and the the boat that we're working out of is about the size, well, it's a canoe. It's a moosehead canoe made in Quebec and with a big outboard motor and an Inuit guide whose expertise is crucial to the formula. And so they kind of block the vision of the bear when we roll in the water. And then when we're ready, they kind of back up and the bear will turn and see our little neoprene covered heads on the surface, think we're a seal, and just start beelining for us. So they can swim for 10 days without a break, 10 kilometers an hour. And they're so powerful. And we don't even jump in the water until we think we have a somewhat tired looking bear, because some of them are just impossible, far too aggressive. But the deal is, as they come close, you let your air out of your flotation device and your scuba gear and descend and try and get a shot of them swimming over top. And my job was actually to go a little bit ahead of Mario so I could get the shot of him shooting the bear, which is a great plan, but very difficult to execute, we discovered. So an amazing experience, humbling, a great privilege to be in the water with these animals, but it's no joke. It's extremely dangerous.
Yeah, well, it's amazing and exciting to see it just on film. So I can't imagine being there in person. How fast your heart must have been beating.
Yeah.
That's always a challenge with natural history documentary filmmaking, that you can have a shot list, but the weather, the animals are all go on their own schedules.
Yeah.
But you guys did an amazing job with the film, so props to you for that.
Yes.
I want to turn over to Rana now. One of the things that's featured prominently in the film is the Inuit people and the deep knowledge that they have over the whole Canadian Arctic. Canada has a complicated history with First Nations people, but more recently, as Canada looks towards making commitments on climate change and on ocean protection, recently joining the Global Ocean Alliance to promote protection of at least 30% of the ocean by 2030. They've made First Nations peoples a key part of that, with Indigenous protected areas and making sure that communities are involved. So could you speak a little bit to the importance of both ocean protection and involving Indigenous people and local communities to Canada?
I mean, thank you very much for that. And I think that, in both the lead up to the Oceans, Global Oceans Alliance work, and also ongoing, I think there has been a sea change in the activities of government in relation to Indigenous peoples and their role in shaping their own future, quite frankly, and the future of all of us. And I think that anyone who's been to the Arctic will tell you that they are not just the guides and the stewards, but their histories and their knowledge are informing us in all sorts of ways that are only now being uncovered, and for them to be full participants and full partners in the exercise that we're all after in terms of protecting the oceans and protecting the climate in the Arctic. Particularly, I mean, it just goes without saying. And so the nation-to-nation work that's taking place, and we were just prior to this talking about the incredible leadership of people like Natan Obed from the Inuit community, and others and many others who have direct knowledge of the very particular ecosystems in play. And each of these ecosystems we're talking about also are unique in their own right, and require an extraordinary amount of really detailed knowledge that really comes from communities that have been on the ground for literally thousands of years. So I think that's everyone brings a tremendous amount of humbleness to that exercise. In working with those communities, and I think that the partnerships on things like the Global Ocean Alliance work is just the start of that. But more generally, I think that Canada more broadly is very committed to the preservation of the ocean, the longest coastline of any country of the world. We're clearly a huge player in the Arctic and have an enormous amount at stake in the Arctic. And I think the planet, I think that Denis' work and others, I mean, will just demonstrate that the planet has so much at stake in the Arctic. And from our commitment to the Paris climate change targets, through the work that we're doing across government, and it really is across government. And we are a federal system, so there's a federal government and of course provincial and municipal governments, and of course the Indigenous peoples. So these are collaborative exercises as well. And so from the Paris agreements, we were building a net zero plan for 2050. We've implemented a carbon pricing system in Canada, which has been building and gaining political support and activation over the last many years, and really a Canada-made plan to meet these ambitious targets. And I think that we're at a place where, like the rest of the world, there's an enormous energy transition taking place. There's an enormous awareness transition in terms of the value of places like the Arctic in the context of a very changed geoeconomic situation as well. And so we are working very hard for a Made in Canada plan, net zero by 2050. Our original target was 30% below 2005 emissions, which is coming along to be met, and significant investments along the lines as well. $2 billion for disaster mitigation and adaptation, $2.3 million for investments directly into clean techs, and a variety of things from the ocean plastics charter that we put forward during the G7. Clean fuel standards, electric vehicle transition standard, and building efficiency, of course. So there's a bundle of things that we're trying to do that all relate back to that issue of we need to get through this transition and to make the Arctic thrive.
Yeah. Thank you, Rana, and thank you for Canada's leadership on these issues. We were speaking a little bit before this discussion about how it takes everybody to come together to deal with a challenge like climate change. I thought the film's title itself was informative, Denis, because Under Thin Ice conveys an idea that's, we've kind of all become familiar with the images of the shrinking extent of sea ice, how much area it covers. But one of the things that's less reported is the average thickness of the ice is also smaller year over year. And you faced this issue when you guys were filming, heading out onto the ice, seeing that there was water above the ice where the campsite was supposed to be. And of course, the water under the ice was a little bit less separated. The ice was not as thick and robust as it usually is. So having been to the Arctic, both of you, Jill and Denis, can you speak to the pace of change? Do you notice things year on year, or has it been a longer time scale than that to see how things are changing?
Well, things are changing fast. And they're changing faster and faster, and this is a big challenge for Canada. Not only is the ice disappearing at an unprecedented pace, but Mario Cyr, who was with us, he's been traveling to the Arctic for the last 40 years. I mean, he's been doing like 45 trips to the Arctic, and he told us that the change occurred in the year 2000. Before the year 2000, everything was about the same. The animals were there when at this time of the year and this time. But since the year 2000, everything is changing. The ice is melting away sooner and sooner in spring, and the ice is forming later and later in the autumn. So it's a terrible thing that is happening, because For the Inuit people, the ice and for the living, the web of life of the Arctic, one must understand that the pyramid of life in the Arctic is a very short pyramid, because all the living things in the Arctic depend on tiny creatures like plankton and microalgae, and these tiny creatures are thriving because of the sea ice, you know. Because when you look underneath the sea ice, it's like a prairie, an upside down prairie, where all these microalgae are growing, and the little plankton, tiny creatures, are eating those, and then small fish eat these, and then you have seals eating the fish, and then you have polar bears eating the seal. So everything is dependent on these microscopic animals. Now, these microscopic animals are very fragile to any change in their environment. So when the ice is not there, where will the microalgae grow, you know? Or if the sea is becoming more acidic in the Arctic, how will that affect the tiny planktons, you know? So it's a very challenging, it's a very worrisome thing, especially because everything is changing everywhere, you know. And when I did this film, I talked to many researchers across Canada, and one of the principles of the Canadian government is that the Canadian government wants to take action according to science. Well, I think that Canada should help scientists to getting to the Arctic, because all the researchers told me it's so difficult and expensive to do research in the Arctic. We need more funding. Just imagine just one case. How do you manage to count the number of polar bears in such a vast area as the Canadian Arctic? You know, there are about 20 subpopulation of polar bears everywhere in the Arctic. How do you do that? You know, it's mind-boggling trying to do that. It costs money. You need airplanes. You need all kinds of things. So and how to know what's happening under the ice with these tiny creatures? You know, in winter, in summer, under the ice, very difficult conditions for the researchers, and it costs a ton of money. So I think that if Canada wants to do something to help, Canada should help the researchers and the scientists, so that we can know more of what's happening and how fast it's happening.
You know, it's interesting because we learn so much from our Indigenous friends in the North who can tell us about their experiences through their lifetime and from the lessons from their elders. And I just love listening to the stories, but it's terrifying. The sea ice is what they refer to as the land, and the land is what connects them with other communities, with their families, with their traditional practices. They, you know, they go out on the land with their families for a month at a time to go hunt, and yet there is a dwindling amount of time that the ice is safe enough to go out now because it's so thin, and the school year isn't necessarily aligned with the time anymore where they can safely go out on the ice with their families. So we don't necessarily have a history of showing a good cultural sensitivity for the changes and the adaptations that they have to make. It's tremendous. So it's not just affecting the ecosystems, but it's the very way of life for the Indigenous people. And when it comes to science, I think one of the other challenges, you know, Denis so eloquently put that it's important for us to do more science, but we also don't have time for science. We don't have time for the traditional cycles of of science and publication and peer review, it's happening too fast right now, year to year to year. And so we need to get citizen scientists out there. We need to get communicators out there. We need images, and we need to get people, you know, understanding with their hearts and their minds about how important it is to protect this precious place for the people, the wildlife, and for the sake of humanity through global climate change.
Thank you so much, Jill and Denis. There's so many important things of what you said there. The link between people and healthy natural ecosystems is really important, and something that's breaking apart in many places because of the increasing threats of climate change. Denis mentioned ocean acidification. Just for our viewers that aren't familiar with that, as the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere increases, that carbon dioxide is dissolved in seawater and makes the water more acidic. It's a huge challenge for many organisms, but particularly organisms at the base of the marine food chain that build shells to be able to live. And that's becoming an increasing challenge in many places. I want to pick up on the role of two things that both Jill and Denis mentioned are critical to get the word out and get more people involved in this. One is storytelling. Obviously, Denis has played this out by making the film. The other part is science and the role of science in informing policy. And Rana, given your role supporting many different activities as Consul of Canada in Northern California and Hawaii, and your support for cultural events like the International Ocean Film Festival, I wanted to get your perspective on the importance of storytelling for advancing on these issues and the importance of science for informing policy.
No, just to build on, you know, both Jill and Denis' point, I mean, I think that, you know, 100% agree. I think that, you know, we are at a, you know, when I was watching that film last night, I was that 1 out of every 2 breaths that we take is dependent on, you know, sort of that line itself is such an extraordinary line, should be shared much more. And, you know, that the inverse field that underneath the ice and just understanding what's under there was just such a, you know, those two things. And the third thing, if, you know, people get a chance, and please do see this film, because I think it's a really extraordinary film. It's very well scored, by the way. I think that it's great cinematography, soundtrack, and it's a real credit to the team that's done that. And, but one of the things, they also some really good visuals in that. And some of those are around, you know, the thinning of the sea ice, the way in which, you know, how fast this is really happening. And I think that we're all kind of aware that this is happening, but, you know, the interaction with the jet stream, that those graphics were just so well put. And it just goes to show that, you know, we're very close to being able to really achieve global urgency and consensus around serious action, but it requires an element of storytelling that, you know, just taking it to additional levels. And I think that that's where, you know, folks like Jill and Denis and others really play a strong role. And we're here, you know, as part of our part, you know, as government, to support some of this. And the Ocean Film Festivals plays a big role in catalyzing that conversation. But I think that there's a lot more we can do, particularly with new media, digital media, awareness raising amongst younger generations, you know, who are online by nature, and how we can start creating a real campaign around this. I think the WWF years ago did a great job with their Polar Bears campaign. There's, you know, more that we can build on that. So that storytelling element, and that idea that story is the key to where we need to go right now. And that second part that Denis mentioned in terms of, you know, creating capacity as well is something which is absolutely essential. And this is the, you know, the government of Canada believes in science, and you know, we're in this context now where, of course, there's the global pandemic happening right now. There's many other distractive elements that are happening in our world. But this idea of, you know, creating capacity and funds to make sure that we get scientists up to the Arctic, use the best technology, a lot of great satellite technology out of you know, even the Bay Area, including Planet Labs, who does excellent work down here. the combination of that technology and having scientists up there to be doing much more, and that idea of citizen science that Jill mentioned, I think is also super critical in this, in the sense that, you're right, we don't have time for peer reviews. We've got time to make sure we get grad students, we get really interested amateurs, others that are up there and that are constantly supporting a kind of a web of the way. And this is the way that a lot of science gets done nowadays, and kind of a distributed open source science that's taking place. So I think that all of those are very important components, and I think that the government be very open to working with partners to figure out how we can make that happen.
That's fantastic, Rana, and so important. Looking at places that are most affected by climate change, it tends to be exactly the issue Jill mentioned, where the pace of change is faster than the pace of traditional science, and many places don't have the capacity either, because they're small island developing states that can't churn out science as fast as the sea is rising around them, or communities that are remote and difficult to reach. One of the emerging issues in the Arctic is that as the sea ice melts, there's an increasing footprint projected in the area from cruise ships, from additional activities, perhaps fishing happening in areas where it was impossible or heavily restricted before because of the sea ice. Rana, could you share a little bit about how Canada sees this new geopolitical challenge of increasing activity and increasingly crowded Arctic with fragile ecosystems and fragile human communities around it that will be impacted by that increasing activity?
Yeah, I mean, what I could say is that Canada is, one of the early and very active members of the Arctic Council, clearly, which is, I think, still the body that needs to be engaged in this. But as we were talking offline about how 2 years ago, I think it was the first year that we had a cruise ship that ended up in the Arctic, and it became an issue as these waters become more navigable, and it becomes an issue of safety and security. If anything were to happen up there, there's not a lot of support that could be provided, just given the level of infrastructure that's taking place. So it's a real security issue or a safety issue. The second part is, those communities in those areas aren't really, they're not really set up to, receive mass tourism in that way. And I think that we need to pay real close attention in terms of, monitoring who does go through those waters, and creating some capacity to do so. And that's been the issue, is to, and these are, some of them are unresolved issues. We of course have, many outstanding issues around the maintenance of just protocol up in the high Arctic, and that need to be resolved and are still ongoing. And then there's the geopolitics of the situation as well, where we have there are some differing views amongst Arctic nations in terms of things like resource extraction and other forms of activity that take place. And the law of the sea as well needs to we need to really look closely at some of the practices around the law of the sea up there. And so there's just almost a plethora of issues that take place when all of a sudden an ocean emerges, and part of, one of the great moments of this film that Denis mentioned was that, all of a sudden by 2040, all of a sudden we are going to have, an ice-free Arctic in the summer, and we need to create law and protocol to support that eventuality.
And Canada has played an important leadership role there, agreeing with other nations that the international waters beyond 200 nautical miles, there's a pocket of high seas in the Arctic, are off limits to fishing until there's a little bit more scientific understanding, kind of a precautionary approach to make sure that there's a bit of a limited footprint before things get worse. I think one of the parts of the film that was really powerful for me was all the interactions with the different Inuit guides and sensing their knowledge and their connection to the land meaning the ice and also all the ocean around there. Can you tell us, Denis and Jill, a little bit about your interactions with those communities and how the project was received among the Inuit people that you worked with?
Well, it was, of course, very well received, and we couldn't have done the film without all the wonderful guides we had, and they were so so nice and friendly, and we had to adjust our northern North American, hectic way of life with the Inuit way of life, which they talk slowly, they take their time, and we were so getting to the flow edge, in Lancaster Sound. We tried to get there for, like 3 days in a row, but every time, at one point, the guide would stop the skidoos and told us, "No, we're not going further. We stop here." And then I turned back and, why are we stopping? I mean, and then he tells us, "Well, just look ahead." And we stand there with Jill and Mario, and then we see all the ice, going up and down like a slow motion earthquake. I mean, all the ice that we were seeing was crumbling apart, and the next day the new flow edge would be where we were standing. So it was very important to be with them, and just seeing how they interact with the land and all that. It was a very interesting. There were some kind of heartbreaking moments also when we were in the Inuit communities. It's not in the film, but I must say it because I'm too frustrated by that. I mean, how come a bottle of orange juice costs $25 in Arctic Bay? I cannot see why it's so costly, So I think that the government must really do something so that these communities can enjoy different commodity and food at a reasonable price. I mean, I couldn't understand that. But anyhow, we were very fortunate, and I thank all the guides, and there were some like Mr. Maliki, and they were fantastic. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, we absolutely could not have made the film without our Indigenous partners, and yeah, I'm always struck by their sense of change too. I like to ask, how do you feel about the fact that most of these hardships that you're facing in life today are caused by us from the South? Like, do you feel resentment? Do you feel, fear for the future? What is it that you feel? And most of the time I was met with sort of just a resignation to the whole concept of adaptation. It's like, well, we can't predict the future, but we'll just adapt to what happens. And I felt this incredible sense of sort of graciousness. I think that if I was living in the North and was feeling the onslaught of everything coming from the developed world, I would be pretty angry with the changes that I was seeing, because I feel like when I'm filming the ice, that it's an endangered species, and that every time I camp on the ice, it might be the last time I get to have an experience in a location like that. So how must they feel as it destroys like their way of life and their culture, and they lose the Komatiks and have to move to a motorboat, and they lose the polar bear and seal hunt and have to find some other way to survive. Like, years ago, I was in Labrador on a project, and I met with the woman in charge of food security for the community, and she would give out guns, bullets, gasoline, so that people could hunt and bring back protein that would go into the freezer and be saved for whatever family needed it. And when a hunt occurs, the proceeds are divided up, and everybody shares in the benefits of the hunt. And it's just such a smart way to go. But when I went back to Labrador 2 years later, that very same woman who had been in charge of the food security had committed suicide. It was too much, the mental anguish of dealing with that and so many other challenges of the North. And it broke my heart, but it absolutely cemented in my mind how important it is to tell these stories so that people have a sense of what's going on in this very remote and difficult region to reach.
Thank you for sharing that, Jill. It raises, a question that's not often reported, of the loss of emotional stability that comes from losing ecosystems, losing the knowledge that they had about how the whole system operated is no longer current, and that's very anguishing and difficult to deal with. I think we have a few audience questions that I'll get to in a second, but I wanted to first just hear a little bit more about your wildlife encounters in the Arctic. We see these iconic species: belugas, narwhals, bowhead whales, of course the walrus and polar bears that took so much dedicated work to get those shots. But I just wanted to ask, on a kind of lighter note, what was your favorite animal to see in the Arctic, whether it was with them in the water or from the boat or from the ice?
I have one experience. Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead, Jill. Go ahead, Jill.
I was just going to say, there's one extraordinary experience that I had that hit the cutting room floor. But there was a day when we tried to get out to the flow edge, and we were unable to because the ice was too thin and it was moving up and down and breaking apart. And as we came back, we had to cross these giant leads and leap over them with the skidoos and drag the komatiks. And we got to one point where our guide, David Oyokaluk, said, okay, we're on the safe side of these big cracks, so we could stop for a moment, take a deep breath. We'll be able to get back to our camp. And we stopped and we put a hydrophone, so a microphone, into the water, into one of these leads, and just listened to the life below. And between Mario and I, we recognized all the sounds, and it was the most incredible cacophony of life that I've ever heard. And it actually inspired me. And I've now been collecting the sounds of these animals to make music, from the clicks of the narwhals and the canary sounds of the belugas and the singing trill of the bearded seals and the ringed seals. It was so remarkable. I will never forget that moment.
Wonderful. Denis?
And for me, it was finally getting at the flow edge in Lancaster Sound, where you had all these marine animals. It was like being on another planet. I mean, there was absolutely no sound at all. You can see the sea as far as the eye can see, and all these animals, narwhals, belugas, and whales, all doing their things, and all the time we were being worried about the polar bears and all that. But of course, my next favorite encounter was with polar bears. I mean, they're such an iconic species, and especially when we filmed that mother bear with the two small cubs, swimming into the water. That was a magic moment, and one that it's not, and it's why it's at the end of the film, because everything that is at stake in the Arctic can be resumed by this mother bear with two cubs, and maybe one of these cubs won't make it, and all that. So yeah. So and of course it was also kind of very special when some polar bears came around camp and got closer and closer to the camp, and especially when we had to go away to you know
Go to the bathroom.
yeah, to go to the bathroom. They did that. It was a small tent which was a little bit too far from camp at my liking, you know.
We got to be
Anyhow,
really fast.
yeah. But all the wildlife was interesting, from tiny flowers to small fish to for someone who loves nature. I mean, the Arctic is surprisingly rich in wildlife. Everybody is talking about tropical forests, but I think that under the ice there you have, like Jill just said, that when you hear the sounds, you know that there's a crowd of living animals underneath there. Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, take me to your leader when I heard those sounds. Who is the intelligent species on this planet? I think it's down there.
Can I ask a quick question? It's that, you know, seeing that film, I was just totally blown away by the underwater shots that you got, and you know what it must be like. Jill, I mean, you're a diver who's dived everywhere, one of the most experienced divers in the world. What was it like to, you know, just to dive underneath an iceberg that is potentially toppling? And what are the what does that feel like in, you know, Arctic versus other places?
Well, 20 years ago, 20 years ago, I went to Antarctica to be the first person to cave dive inside an iceberg, wow. The largest moving object on the planet, and to this day, the largest iceberg that ever calved away down from the Ross Ice Shelf into the Southern Ocean. And so it can be terrifying. It's a continually shifting environment. The ice is cracking, it's breaking, it's melting, so it's dissolving. It makes for a very difficult environment to film in, because you have both like when we're in Greenland, we have like freshwater ice that's melting into salt water and creating a whirling halocline that you can't focus in. It's fizzing with bubbles as the ice is melting. There's a plankton bloom going on, and so it's very challenging for sure. And when we're around the actual icebergs in Greenland, very dangerous, because they're constantly rolling and cracking and breaking, and when you're close to it, you could be hurt or killed just by moving ice. So you have to kind of be on your toes at all times.
You were mentioning in the film, you mentioned about the sound. Like that was something that blew me away. Like it sounded like thunder.
Yeah. Sometimes the icebergs will even get to a point where they're bobbing up and down in the water, but they're impacting the seafloor. And when they hit the seafloor, that boom absolutely resounds through your chest. And then also when it hits the bottom, dirt, kelp, shards of ice will come shooting up towards the surface, and you get these incredible up currents and down currents from the different mixing temperatures and salinities of water. So even just sort of staying where you want to be in the water column sometimes has its challenges too.
And tell us, Jill, were you cold while you were diving?
Oh, I mean, you're never comfortable. There's actually one dive where I had a full flood of my suit. We were shooting some of the polar bear footage, and Denis like, well, so can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And I'm like, well, my suit is completely full of water, so I'm good for an hour, like a real hour, not a film director's hour. I'll be fine like this. But beyond that, I got to get out of this and get dry.
Wow.
Well, it as a diver, it sounds terrifying to be dealing with all those changing dynamics in cold water.
Yeah.
Just concentrating itself would be hard with the temperature. Your mention of the sounds, and some of those sounds are in the film. is those sounds are so striking, beautiful, cacophony, mix of sounds. It made me think about the increasing sound pollution in the ocean that's talked about a little bit in scientific circles. And, if the ice is gone and there's more ship traffic and different things, how will the Arctic sound in a few years? I want to make sure we get a couple of audience questions since we've had people listening in. So I'll turn it over to those if it's okay with you all. We had a question from Shannon Bryant in San Rafael, California, about when we were talking about science and how to accelerate the science that's going on in the Arctic. She asked, would it be possible to partner with educators and schools, high schools and universities to show these films to a wider audience and get those people to participate in research, bringing the stories out into the classroom? And wanted to get your quick reactions to that suggestion.
It's a very good idea, and I hope that our production house will do exactly that. And we have also a website going with the film for a younger audience, but I think it's only in French, unfortunately, right now. But I think that the more people see the film, the better it is.
But we also have a beautiful app in both English and in French, both in Android and in Mac, and it's free. You can download it on Google Play or the App Store. It's called Discover the Arctic, and it's full of the journey as well as all the animals and little quizzes, and it's fantastic for all these kids that are homeschooling these days to get lost in for a few hours. It's a beautiful product that we hope that reaches a lot more people.
I'm not a kid and I want to download it already.
Yeah.
We had another question from Paul McManus, who's also a diver in Monterey, California. He's asking if the diets of indigenous people have shifted because of climate change. So are the Inuit eating differently because of the changes in their immediate environment?
Well, they want to eat what they call country food, which is their traditional diet. But when you go to the northern store, it's full of southern food. It's full of horrible, Wonder Bread and things that don't have a lot of nutritious value. And one of our wonderful helpers in the north who cooked for us on one of the segments, she was unfamiliar with Southern food, and she said, "I'm so sorry, but I tried to get, things that you would enjoy from your home, and so I got, this bread and this and this and this." And I'm like, no, I want to eat your country food. But yeah, it's not healthy for them. They need to be able to continue to eat their traditional foods, and so that adaptation is going to be incredibly challenging for them. It's physical, but it's emotional too.
And what we read in the research about the elders and other Inuit people is that the hunting is more difficult, and they notice that the animals like the seals are skinnier, and that makes difficult for them to hunt them because they sink. And if they catch them, well, the meat is not as good as it was before. So as you can see, the changes are going even that far. Yeah.
There's a lot of changing dynamics. I was struck by a recent study of marine life looking at fish specifically that said that with current climate change by 2100, which isn't that far off now, only 80 years, 60% of all fish species won't be able to survive in their current ranges. So really massive scale change. We have a question also about the filmmaking itself. How long did it take to make the film, get all those amazing shots? And was it one prolonged visit or many visits? And how long did the process take, both filming and after that processing?
Well, from the starting from scratch, it took about 3 years. because we had to do the research and write a scenario and everything and build the budget, get the budget for that film, because it's very expensive to go in the north, in the Arctic. But we were very well prepared. So we did the film in about 2 months. We did 3 trips. One trip to Arctic Bay, which is 700 kilometers north of the polar circle. And then we had a 10-day pause, and then we went to Greenland for another week or so. And then we had a 10-day pause, and then we went back to Nojat, which is right on the Arctic Circle, way up north Hudson Bay, where we filmed the polar bears and at White Island. So it was done in a fairly quick time, because when you look at the big National Geographics or BBC films, they can spend like 5 months on the same location getting that shot. We had a very short filming period. This is why it was kind of very difficult for the crew, because we needed to shoot very rapidly, and you don't control the ice, you don't control the weather, and you don't control the animals. Well, at the end we were very fortunate, because we filmed a lot, so we had a lot of stuff and to tell our story finally.
And on top of all the other factors, you don't always control your dry suit, as
yes,
right.
and the mosquitoes also.
That's
the mosquitoes.
right.
Wow. I want to turn to Rana for a last question, and it's turning to another icy part of the planet that Jill mentioned, actually, the Ross Sea, and where you dove in an iceberg there, cave diving. Around Antarctica, there's an international group of countries that comes together to decide about the management of the waters. There's several proposed areas for protection, and Canada has been a champion for new marine protected areas around the Antarctic. So, Rana, can you just tell us about the importance of supporting those proposals for marine biodiversity, and as Canada takes on global leadership as part of the Global Ocean Alliance and with its commitments for ocean protection?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good point. I mean, that issue of marine biodiversity is something that has, come up it was a background issue. It's now come to the forefront in so many discussions around climate change and the connection point, and I mean around the connection point between climate, oceans, and all of our conservation efforts. And I think that biodiversity, from the perspective of the Canadian government, we're certainly making that a priority commitment as part of our Global Oceans Alliance commitment. And specifically, I mean, I think that, we've talked in the past about that being a commitment in oceans, including the Pacific Ocean and others, but in and around the Antarctic. And I think that we need to think about the top of the world and the bottom of the world as sort of tremendous outliers, in the sense that, the biosensitivity of those regions are just so significant in the context of the climate change and what's happening. And I think, the way that, if we were to sort of paint this whole picture and to say, how you can storytell around that significantly, is not just around species loss, which is significant, but that idea of 1 out of every 2 breaths that was mentioned at the beginning of the film comes from the ocean. And more broadly, I think this issue around the protection of very fragile large animals in some of the ecosystems that we're talking about, namely the polar bear in one instance, but also walruses, which were really well featured in this film.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Rana. It's so important both for the wildlife and for the productivity of our oceans. The polar regions are drivers of the entire global ocean ecosystem. I wanted to share with our audience, we're partnering to support an initiative around this that one of our partners is leading to get those 3 new marine protected areas around Antarctica. So if you go to only.1/Antarctica, you can sign the petition urging world leaders to support new protections for icy parts of our planet. So I'll stop with that. I want to say, just like our planet needs the poles to keep us centered and keep the stability of life on Earth, we need poles of leadership that bring us stories, that show us the right directions. Canada has been a pole of leadership. Filmmakers like you, Denis, are poles of leadership, and explorers like you, Jill, that bring us into remote and difficult to reach places and bring back the stories from them are poles of leadership that keep us all centered and focused and moving towards the right direction. So thank you so much, all of you, for your time. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. And if you haven't yet, get in and enjoy some more of the amazing films that we have. Watch Under Thin Ice if you haven't yet. It's a must see. And have an amazing weekend, hopefully with some ocean content from your couch.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. Bye.